So good morning, everybody. I hope that you're able to hear me. I just wanted to let you know that today's presentation is going to be with Heather, but I also wanted to let you know if you have any issues today, go ahead and look for my name. It's A. Perez in the chat, and go ahead and send me a message letting me know if you're having any issues hearing or if you need assistance. You can also go on Sched app and find the help for chat, and they should be able to help you. So today's presentation by Heather is going to be, is inclusive online student spaces. Heather, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. You're all set.
The title of this session is Classroom 101.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm super stoked to be here with you all today. Before I get started with sharing my screen and then eventually going ahead and cutting myself off through video, I would love for us to go ahead and just introduce ourselves in the chat over here to the side, well to the side because I could see it on the side of my screen. And then I'm also going to go ahead and just place a little prompt up there about our time currently during these closures and COVID-19. Although this has been very challenging for us all, maybe share with us a treasured memory that's taken place during this time period, because obviously we've had the opportunity to spend some time at home with families. And so I know that that's kind of been a big transition for us all, but it's kind of cool to see what people have done during this time. And I'll go ahead and let that happen for a little bit, and then we'll get started in about 30 seconds. How's that? We have some Hemet people. See Hesperia. Deborah Peters. What's up, Deborah? IAQ. Woo! Corona Norco. Man, we got a lot of people up in here. That's awesome. Menifee. Paris. My neighbors. We're here in Romoland right now, so great. Very, very cool. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and jump into the presentation. Again, for just like technical reasons, I have to turn off my camera just because my computer or the Wi-Fi here isn't, participating nicely with me. So I'm gonna stop my video, and then I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. The screen is going to have on it the presentation for today. And so I'll be pretty much in presentation mode because I know people do prefer to have the closed captionings taking place. And obviously, since we're talking about inclusion at this point, we know that closed captioning is a necessary tool for accessibility for our students. You also have access to this presentation within the Sched. And again, my email is at the very end of this presentation. So if you have any questions or you need anything from me, just go ahead and feel free to reach out. Again, I'm excited to go back and read through the chat bar to see all of these amazing educators coming here today to participate in extending their learning for obviously a big transition coming next school year when all of us are going to be starting in a virtual realm. But ultimately, we are here to support each other, and that's what's so great about Google Camp. Again, my name's Heather Hilz Fitzgerald. I am within the Romoland School District. I recently just took on the role as assistant principal over at Boulder Ridge Elementary, which is actually the same school I started my teaching career in. So I'm extremely excited to continue the work here in Romoland and support our students. And I'm also just proud to be part of such a great county of education as well with Riverside. So today's topic is something that's extremely dear to my heart, and that is inclusion. Ultimately, when I started out in the classroom, obviously you have students with IEPs and you learn to support them in many different ways. But I was very fortunate enough to have eventually established a teaching model under the specialized academic instruction model, where I worked closely with my co-teacher who is an SAI instructor. Therefore, all of the IEP students were rostered to my classroom, and then she and I would participate in lots of different co-teaching type of models. So again, I am a big believer in inclusion. I'm a big believer in supporting our students' diverse needs, and therefore I wanted to share some ideas with you all today. So a lot of times when we are, starting a new school year and we see our students for the first day and we begin to understand them, there's certain things that we obviously can probably learn about them right in that moment, just their personalities, what their likes and dislikes are. But a lot of times we aren't really aware of what maybe their physical needs are. And so in the recent years, I really have seen that there's been a sharp movement into supporting students with disabilities and really focusing on really developing those inclusive practices throughout all schools, throughout all classrooms, in order to make the learning spaces for those students relevant and accessible. So thinking about your classes previously, the students that had those IEPs, I apologize, I'm out of school, there's a bell. Okay, or your 504s, and then obviously your gen ed students who ultimately needed their specific interactions and support or content. It's just, we as educators have such a large job in order to understand who our learners are. And so also being aware of the disabilities out there that can be seen or unseen is something that we should consider at the very beginning of the year. That being said, like I said previously, my experience with inclusion was developed around the specialized academic instruction model. And so that was an opportunity for me and the co-teacher to begin to really create rich learning experiences, not only for our students that had IEPs, that were GATE students or had 504 plans, but all students really did benefit from this co-teaching model. We used our strengths as educators as a way to create inclusive environments to support all learners. So that was an opportunity for us to work in real time together and show students real life collaboration amongst teachers in a way that will allow for them to see that their needs are being met no matter if they are students with IEPs or not. They had two different adults in the classroom to help support them. And not only was it the academic support that was provided within that type of co-teaching model, but I believe that within my classroom during that time, over those years that we worked together, my students began to take on characteristics that I've never seen before. They definitely began to have patience employed into their behaviors. They had tolerance, acceptance, and above all, empathy, because we began to teach together that diverse learners are all over the world. We are all diverse, and therefore we need to support one another no matter what it takes. So now that we're going to be transitioning into these virtual, environments, it's ultimately going to be our first plan of attack to create connections to our students. And in order to support students who may have issues with depression at this time, anxiety, maybe they're feeling uncertain, this is going to be an opportunity for us to really help support the communication and help students feel that they are safe, that they are accepted, and that they can be who they are within this online platform. So the first thing, and this is like a common trend of what I keep saying when I talk with teachers and when we're having discussions, and what I'm hearing through the grapevine through education, is that the first thing is that teacher presence is going to be extremely vital. You are at this time going to be one of their number one mentors, even though you are in a digital mode. So getting to know your students for those first 2 weeks is going to be crucial. And I think establishing culture building activities that infuse academia into it is going to be your best bet for those first few weeks, because you need to engage, you need to motivate, and you need to hook them in to understand that you are there for them even though you aren't face to face. Another component to that is also getting to know your families. I believe that especially with your students with disabilities or students who have IEP plans, I feel that those connections to families are even more important because they have so many added elements to their plate. They're not only just attending school in a general education setting, but they do have added on support services that they need to be aware of, that they need to be supported in. So having that, two-way communication with those parents at the get-go for all students is going to be extremely important. So some of those ideas that are going to help support that communication is holding a Google Meet session for like a kickoff for the school year with all of your families, and then give that time period too for yourself to provide tutorials to your families. I know for our school site specifically, and even for our district, a common trend amongst educators when we would have discussions about planning for virtual learning in the fall was that we need to support our parents with the how-tos, how to log on to the student's Google Classroom. What are the difference of the learning apps that are taking place? What are the expectations of turning in assignments? So we as a school site are actually going to develop a Google site for families that will store all of that information there so that parents have something that they can rely on if they need help navigating this new technological system of education. I also believe that weekly whole group meetings with families might be a really good approach at the beginning of the school year. That way you can check in with families and see what their needs are, see what their concerns are, and be able to adapt and be flexible for them for the rest of the school year. And then obviously provide opportunities where you can do fun culture building activities with those family members and those students, because ultimately we're here not only to support their academics at this time, but we're also really there to help support the social emotional aspects of our students. So now really diving deep into technology and the accessibility component of it. You know, to be honest with you, technology does such grand things for our diverse learners. And now we as educators need to refine the way that we are presenting our assignments, presenting our learning experiences in this virtual realm. So one of the things that you may want to go ahead and explore even deeper is that of the Web Accessibility Initiative. That's a great place to start to kind of understand what am I producing on my end that I want my students to engage in that's going to be accessible to them. And they ultimately break it down with this acronym of POUR. And I'll go over a little bit more in detail what each of those means. Because a lot of times when we push these things out on Google Classroom, or we're creating some type of a hyperdoc or a hyper slide, or pushing out like learning programs to our students, we oftentimes don't always use the lens of all of the different learners and how they're actually visualizing what they're seeing, how the audio is being interpreted to them, and even the workload. Is it a doable process for these students? So the first section you see is perceivable, and that's us being aware of how are we designing the space so that it is visually supporting our students, and is it accessible? So even thinking about like the colors, the font sizes you're using, the fonts. I mean, come on now, you guys know when you're in the classroom and your students are creating multi-paragraph essays and they're giving you cursive writing, you have to intervene and say like, hey, we should probably do a Times New Roman or an Arial font. So just being aware of that kind of stuff so that we know that we're not making it more complicated or hard to view more or less. The other thing that we see that's important to our students is operable. So being able to remember if our students have any disabilities, maybe with a 504 plan, that they're working with occupational therapists. And so being able to manipulate keyboards, being able to have the pacing of that content to them in a different modality sometimes is also really crucial. So I do definitely believe that a lot of our time as educators being spent this next school year is going to be those pre-recorded lessons where students can go through it one time and then possibly rewind and or rewatch again, because we want to make sure that they are able to access that learning, but in the amount of time that they need for it. Understandable. So yesterday in one of my sessions, we really talked about less is more in the sense of what we're pushing out to our students. Like, is it meaningful? Is it connecting to priority standards? And therefore, is the content understandable to them? So we need to make sure that we are, addressing the needs of our students based on possibly reading levels, or going back into our data, looking at where they're at, possibly like in an iReady diagnostic, and making sure that the materials that we're providing to them are geared towards their level, or we're providing accommodation or modifications to those things that will make it easier for them to, interact with. And then last but not least within this, you want to think about robust. So how are you also attaching technology to these types of activities, such as supportive online learning programs or assistive technology that is going to make your students much more successful? A lot of times we have speech to text type of components added, or even screen readers, but just making students aware of those tools, being knowledgeable about them yourself, and then also educating parents about what those might be to help support students is going to be very beneficial for your students throughout the school year. And so when you have a chance and you either read through my dictated notes on this slide deck, or I think you can click on this acronym chart here, I'm thinking, that will take you directly to the Web Accessibility Initiative, and you can even dive in even deeper as to what each of those standards look like to help support your learners. Another thing that's going to be your best friend in designing learning experiences at this time is going to be the idea of universal design learning. It's obviously not something that's a new idea. I feel like it completely has been revisited throughout all of education, but I think now more than ever, this might be a great opportunity for you to explore these components to help support more of that personalized learning for your students. And it also incorporates a lot of that MTSS background and foundation, which ultimately is constantly having us reflect on where our students are at, either behaviorally or academically, what goals do we have set for them, and then constantly reflecting on, are they meeting those goals, or how am I going to have to transition my teaching to definitely meet their needs? So when we think of universal design learning, you have these three core ideas, but you're ultimately constantly thinking of, how am I going to provide multiple means to engage my students? How am I going to provide multiple means of representation and multiple means of them expressing their learning? So not just having a one-size-fits-all type of education or educational experiences for your students, but providing you hear this probably commonly, the voice and choice that your students need to either be engaged, to be successful with the content that they've learned, and just allow them to be individuals to share how they are experts in their learning. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop talking for a second, and I'm going to go ahead and share this video from Anna Cole, who is the one that I was co-teaching with previously, and I hope this is going to translate well. But she is an SAI instructor within the Romoland School District, and I think she just has like a really good perspective about what universal design learning is for her end, which is special education.
Hi, everybody. So I couldn't be there with you today because I'm in my own special ed department meeting, but Ms. Hilz asked me to let you know a little bit of what I did yesterday or the last 2 days. I went to a UDL conference, which is Universal Design Learning, and talked about how it is for all students. So, of course, me being SAI, I'm going to talk about inclusion. Just a little snippet. So many of you already know it. Those of you who work with me love it. So what can I say? So anyways, I'm going to tell you what inclusive education is not. It is not mainstreaming. No. It is not dumping a student in a gen ed class and leaving them there and expecting the gen ed teacher to do everything. Nope. And you can ask my teachers, that is not how it's done. Second of all, students are primarily grouped in heterogeneous mixed ability groups. So it's all students. So UDL is just basically a way to include all students in all learning. And it is about the teacher talking with the students, asking the students what they need. It's what they need to be successful in their own learning. So it's basically giving the students a lot of choices in being able to show their knowledge through different ways. So not just all one way. I know we're all stuck on tests, and I know we have to do that, but if you really want to, and I will tell you this, inclusion is coming, whether anyone likes it or not, which nobody should say they don't like it. Okay, sorry, that was Juanita on the speaker. So anyways, what it is, inclusive education is both a vision, and a practice. You gotta believe it, you gotta know it. All children can learn. We already know that. All children can and will. Do they learn at the same rate? No. Do they learn the same way? No. So UDL basically is saying how to give up a little bit of that control, which can be hard. But if you think of it this way, a teacher's not giving up her control or his control. You still remain management. You still manage your class. You still manage the learning. But you let them decide how is best for themselves to learn. So anyways, that's a little snippet. I really enjoyed it, and I hope to bring it to my teachers that I do work with. And if I don't,
Okay, so I'm going back to the presentation. I know Aranza just texted me, and I'm going to check that really quick because I hope it wasn't. Oh, it's working great. Thanks, Aranza. You're awesome. But I just thought that was really cool to share on her end because she is extremely passionate about the work she does. And obviously, we have teachers of all different types here. So I thought I'd give a shout out to, the special education teachers who I believe do so much for us to help not only our students just with IEPs, but have just an impact on all students at our school sites. So moving on, one of the things that you're going to really love to provide to your students and families at this time, like I said previously, were those different types of technology extensions that will help students be able to support their learning. So this is a toolkit here. If you are in the actual presentation right now, which I see like 47 of you are, I believe if you click on the actual toolkit, it's going to take you to a site called Open Access, and Open Access is pretty much like the plethora motherlode of accessibility for students. And so feel free to access that and definitely bookmark it because it's something that you're going to want to refer to help support students, all students, to be honest with you. So go ahead and take a look at that when you can. And back to the presentation. Okay. Obviously, we're at a Google camp. We as a Romoland School District are a Google district, and I know many of you all are out there as well, but we can't forget all of the amazing work that Google does for us, and then especially when it comes to accessibility. One of the things that I really enjoy, and I have to just like read it word for word right now, is this quote from them, and it says, "When all students can fully participate in the learning experience in their own way, everyone benefits. That's why we create Google for Education products with accessibility in mind, to help every student learn, be inspired, and achieve their full potential." I just think that's beautiful, because ultimately, especially during these times where diversity is extremely important and where we need to be empathetic of one's needs and interests, we have these applications at our fingertips to really allow students to take control of their learning, to share their learning in different ways. So all of these are going to be hyperlinked images as well. And so if you notice, these are just going to take you to specific either articles or Google sites that will help support you in crafting the most accessible space for your students. And another thing I wanted to mention as well, especially for students, the littles, students with, visual impairments, students who are just visual learners in general, imagery is a really great way to go ahead and create prompts for your students. I know that I was working with a team of TK students over the time we were off and preparing. I shall pause. We were preparing for the next school year, and them developing their weekly units on Google Slides, like a hyper slide type of daily unit. And so a lot of times the words aren't going to be very meaningful for our TK students if they're not able to read yet. So if we create consistent symbols that they see on a daily basis that reflect possibly a subject area, that would be a great way to, just provide that type of support for your students and also families who are trying to facilitate that learning at home. One of my favorite sites to use for those images is flaticon.com, and all of those are, there is premium access, but I get like a ton of them all the time for free, and they are just copy and paste, and you add them and they look pretty cool. I'm a visual learner. I love visuals. Okay, moving on. So yeah, going back into a little bit more of that co-teaching relationship, because that's been some of the conversation that we've had amongst us as administrators, and even with our special education department here at the district. So what is the role of the special education teacher going to look like at this time during that virtual component? So I think what we're really going to have to do is that we're going to have to really come together as a collective whole and strengthen those relationships amongst our general education teachers and our special education teachers. Because ultimately, we are going to be teaching these students virtually, and we need to, team up to use our expertise to support these students in this time. So I suggest definitely, I know like for Mrs. Cole, for Anna, she would definitely say she as a special education teacher really had to go out there and make those bonds, make those relationships with her gen ed teachers strong, and show them that they could trust her, that they could collaborate with her, and ultimately you then gain that second teacher within your learning environment, and ultimately you're going to just have two teachers constantly for all students. She didn't just support my students with IEPs. We looked at students, the class as a whole, and looked at where their needs are based on, small group interventions, and how we could use both of our strengths in different ways to support possibly different groups of students. And then the other element to that too during this time period is that those students get a second mentorship. They get another individual that's cheering them along. A lot of times, it depends. When you're in the classroom, sometimes your personalities with students can sometimes be a struggle, right? We're always working towards building relationships, and we're always working towards solving problems with one another. But sometimes if you have a different personality of a teacher, be able to reach out to a different personality of a student, they can feel that there is someone there for them, that's championing for them, and then also allows for maybe that teacher who is having trouble establishing that solid relationship with that child, learn from the other teacher what type of interaction does that child need. So it's just a win-win for everybody. Now, obviously, we're not going to be this complete face-to-face model at any given time right now, but eventually we will. And so these are just some of the co-teaching models that could possibly be used within a face-to-face environment. But now we have to start thinking, how are we going to be able to translate these co-teaching models into an online learning experience? So I know that we have had talks here about how we are going to structure the special education services and whatnot. Some of my ideas are that special education or SAI instructors will need to have their own Google Classroom where they can, in that Google Classroom, support students with IEP specific goals. And that's what's great about Google Classroom, is that you can differentiate the work for your students directly into Google Classroom. So not all of your students are getting the same piece of work. You can designate which child will receive what support tool, what activity within that Google Classroom. So that's a great way to continue to track their goals, to track their progress, and then go ahead and definitely intervene where needed. The other idea is for the general education teacher that is supporting those students as well with IEPs, is to include your special education teacher within the Google Classroom as a co-teacher, because that's going to be an opportunity for you to collaborate and share expertise where needed to support each of those students' individual needs. And if we're even narrowing it down to another individual, a lot of times our SAI aides, who are a crucial component to special education, they can also be inserted into these Google Classrooms, or even have their own Google Classroom if they're working, with a specific targeted group. So just making sure that we're using as many adults as we can, as many experts as we can, to help support the needs of the students. And plus, it's like, why work on an island with, let's use what we have, let's come together and work smarter, not harder, right? I'll go ahead. I'm not going to show any of these videos at this time because they definitely are face-to-face settings. But some of the stuff that I really enjoyed the most was definitely using blended learning approach to the classroom, such as station rotations, as a way to utilize my SAI instructor in the classroom. She would be stationed at a specific station with heterogeneous group of students. I would be at another station with a heterogeneous group of students. And ultimately, we were just able to really give one-on-one support to each individual child with these really large learning experiences. So we weren't just doing drill and kill kind of things. We were actually writing multi-paragraph essays in small group, whereas I would be, supporting students doing an entire project-based learning math project that they needed guided practice with. And then obviously you have your other stations where independents would come in, or group work. So just being very mindful of the different types of experiences you're going to be providing for your students, and using all the supports that you can. So I come to my kind of like the reflection aspect of this presentation, and that means that I'm probably going to have to get out of this presentation mode at this point, and then come back to face-to-face and work mostly like with chat. But this is called action storming. And this was brought to me last year by an administrator, which I thought was such a great idea. You know, we come to these conferences seeking for knowledge. We get all of these great ideas. Sometimes it's overwhelming because there's so many great ideas. And then sometimes something falls flat, or we just don't get around to it, or we don't know the next steps to take. And so action storming is an opportunity for us to reflect on the learning that we just had, and submit ideas. And then from there, after brainstorming those ideas and narrowing down what is important to us, actually define actions that will take place for us to actually implement some of these learning activities into our classroom. And this is actually a really great, activity to do with your students as well. You know, after a reading, after some type of math concept, brought up, or any type of science or social studies topic discussed, you can stop and have students reflect on their action or their ideas that they generated during that learning, and what actions they are going to take to either continue that learning, or maybe possibly what they need to continue to work on, or research on to continue to be more mastery of that learning. So I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting my screen, and then we'll just do this action storming within the chat. Okay, so does anybody have any ideas on how are they going to use accessibility tools, or how are they going to develop more of an inclusive space for their students in a virtual setting? And nothing has to be like finite, or they could just go ahead and anything that's on your mind. What ideas? So I'm going to go ahead and say, what ideas do you have for inclusion in a virtual setting? And this is a great opportunity for people to share and then steal those ideas, people, right? I already saw one. I love the idea of using closed captioning. And I just saw Heather Donahoe that said aids in Google Classrooms. Yes, it is hard to support the students without that type of access. I completely agree. Our aids are so vital and crucial to that special education environment. So we need to bring them on board. I did that privately too. Let me do that, everyone. We have ideas such as video, virtual breakout groups, of course, after any direct instructions. And that's something that we've been talking about as well. When you have your gen ed teacher in a co-teaching model with your SAI instructor. So after you have your direct instruction lesson as a whole group, that's an opportunity for you to, calendar and, put a time slot in for that SAI instructor to come in and then be part of that one group while you're working with another group, so that you have two adults managing at least, right? Set up Google Voice number, great access for students, parents giving. I've seen the Google Voice number. That's pretty cool because, again, communication is key. And some people feel more confident, or it's just easier for them to use the phone rather than the plethora of apps that we have for communication, right? Team teaching on Google Meets, love it. I love I would like to hear more about that, team teaching. So like teaching in real life together at the same time, I love that. Record lesson later for reference and use a variety of method for assessments. I definitely think at this time when we're pre-recording all these lessons for students, you're gonna have those available for years to come. So make them as generic as possible. So like if you're teaching the standard algorithm, try to just keep it general, because then you'll have a collection of videos that you can use for the future years. I've done that before, and like I go back and reflect on the videos that I've created for students maybe 3 years ago, and then I get to push it out to them, and I don't have to make a brand new video. Oh, okay. I got a question about the name of the webs and the digital icons again. Okay, I'll go ahead and put that directly to everyone. So the one that's for ability apps is Open Access CA. You could probably just Google that one. And then the site that you're going to be getting those cute ones from is flaticon.com. I also think unsplash.com is also a really great site to pull visual elements out. It's free photography that doesn't have any copyright infringements on that. Google Voice. Yes, the use of Lexan fonts. I've downloaded all of those into my, my Google Fonts. Okay, we have 10 minutes left. So now I want to transition. These are ideas. What is going to be a sustainable action that you will take to help support students with inclusive spaces? So what action will you take to support inclusive virtual learning environments? Apply POUR. I know, isn't POUR like totally mind opening? Wow, like I should be aware of things, how they're displayed. I should be aware of, you know, the audio for my students. Okay, let's see. Any other actions out there? I'm gonna go through all the people. I'm looking at all your different screens. So glad that we can all come together in this virtual space. It's pretty amazing. She's ideas with Jenna teachers I work with. Yes, and yes, definitely go back into the SCED and feel free to look at all of my sessions because they all have my presentations in there, and all of my presentations have like multiple hyperlinks within it to other resources. So feel free to use, to modify, share, anything you want. And then also email me if needed. Teach parents how to use tools. That's my, after my Google Camp today, that's my my go-to job is I'm going to start preparing a Google site that's specifically going to help support parents during this virtual time based off of, you know, our kind of individual style here at Boulder Ridge. We're a leader in me schools, so I want to provide those types of resources for for parents. So yes. Oh, thank you, Angela. Okay, so I think we only have just like a few more minutes left. I'm gonna leave my email here in the chat. If you need anything from me, or if for some reason that you've clicked on something, oops, I put it just to Angela. If you need anything from me, just let me know. And again, like if things aren't opening for you, I'll always approve access. I will also go ahead and put my Twitter handle in there. Let's be friends on Twitter. I feel like Twitter has been a game changer for me in the sense of all of the ideas that I am able to pull from so many great educators from all over the world. So definitely get a Twitter handle if you don't have one yet. Yeah, the brainstorming session is very comprehensive. Yeah, the brainstorming session is great. You know, it allows you to have that reflection with your students and then really kind of just see what type of learners they are. Hey, Laurel, what's up? Questions from Angela. Oh, thank you, Aranza, for going back. I love the look of the Bitmoji classrooms, but I can't see how it can be I can see how it will be overwhelming for students with disabilities. Do you have suggestions for Bitmoji classrooms from, okay. So I suggest less is more in those Bitmoji classrooms. And Angela Milverstud, if you email me directly, I did work with our RISE program over here at, with the middle school and elementary teachers. I can go ahead and share with you stuff that I've created, like slide decks that were user-friendly for littles, and then also with students with disabilities. And then, is there a way to connect Immersive Reader to your Google Slides, Google Docs? So Immersive Reader does just read everything off of your screen, I believe. I think it does. You would just want to probably play around with that, or definitely Google that one, because I don't have a definitive answer on that one. How does the CC work for Google Meet? There should be a CC option at the bottom of the Google Meet. For what I was doing previously, I had mine going on in presentation mode with a Google slide, and down below you can press the CC button, and that will allow you to have your voice recorded in words. Okay. And Angela, anything you need, like let me know. Email is probably best, because then I can just pull stuff over from my Google Drive to you. Okay. Yes, great. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. I love all these comments, and yes, like shout out to the SPED teachers, SAI instructors. I'm all down for it. And so we will see you guys later, and have a great rest of your Google camp, okay? Bye.